It's 5:45 p.m., which means it's time for BCTV's weekly media roundup. I'm tonight's host, Roland Boyden, and this is a special one-camera, stripped-down, impromptu, live remote broadcast edition of 545 Live from downtown Brattleboro as we broadcast from the River Garden here. We've still got a jam-packed show on deck for you with all the area headlines, including a follow-up on the shooting that happened at America's Best Inn last week. We'll get you more on that, update you on all the details there. Plenty of Vermont Yankee news back in the headlines here. We'll talk about Entergy's latest filing on disbanding the evacuation plans come 2016. We'll also break down all the latest budget news with a referendum and vote rescheduled for the Brattleboro budget, and also a redo of the budget plans in Putney as well. That's all on deck tonight, and plenty more, including a new cell phone tower from AT&T in the town of Newfane, and plenty of other area headlines as well, including a weather report from BUHS TV, and of course our calendar coverage. It's all in the way, so if you've got the time and the attention span, be sure to stick with us right here on 545 Live.
According to Brattleboro police, there was an officer-involved shooting at roughly 5:30 in the morning on Friday at the America's Best Inn on Putney Road in Brattleboro. There's no more information from police at this time.
Welcome back to this April 11th, 2014 edition of 545 Live. That's footage of the early Reformer coverage at tout.com/BrattReformer of a shooting, officer-involved shooting that happened at America's Best Inn last Friday. We reported on some of that on last week's edition of 545 Live, but details were scarce at that point. Some more details have now been released, and that's what we're going to go into here now. Brattleboro police were following up on a court-ordered search warrant served for room 301 at America's Best Inn, where it was believed that illegal drug-related activities were going on. Upon entry, a Brattleboro police officer, as of yet unnamed, discharged his weapon, fatally wounding a 35-year-old Brattleboro resident. Now, all of this is still under Vermont State Police investigation. And while the officer in question has been put on administrative leave, Vermont State Police officers did say that this is really common practice and shouldn't be read into too much as an indicator of any wrongdoing on the part of the police officer. A temporary administrative leave following a shooting is just standard procedure. But as soon as we know more on this story, we'll get you that information as well. All right, moving on. Budget referendum talks here in Brattleboro have dominated the local headlines as well. Several town meeting reps from this year did get enough signatures, 50 in fact, following Brattleboro Representative Town Meeting where the town budget was passed. They did get enough signatures to call a special townwide vote, send it back to the voters at large to decide if they want to approve the Brattleboro budget or not. That's now been slated for Thursday, April 17th, and it'll be a special vote held not at the high school, as voting often is, but just back up the street at BCTV's 230 Main Street haunt. That's the town offices, also the office of the town clerk. And voting is going to be open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. again Thursday the 17th. Now for more, we've been compiling a special spotlight video look at all of these issues, including a proposed 1% option tax that would have alleviated some of the costs from this here police fire upgrade project as it's spread out over the next couple of years. Also, issues of authority, especially muddied by a recent charter change, were cleared up in part by the town attorney, Robert Fisher. So we've put this all together into a special spotlight video. Let's take a look.
Up until 1969, commerce sales were essentially equal state to state. Vermont instituted sales tax. Sales dropped along this corridor in Vermont.
The consequence of the sales tax is not a good thing. The consequence of an expanding and really almost unimaginable property tax, I think, is much more dangerous for the future of the town.
And so would every other property owner in town. They'd have less money to spend. And so where would they not spend that money? Well, they would probably not spend that money on groceries, on local entertainment, on a lot of things.
If the budget were not approved, and the select board were saying, we think we should then not go forward with the police fire, the proper procedure for that would be for the select board on its own motion to call a special town meeting to rescind the bond vote, or the remaining bond vote, of a year and a half ago, the police fire.
Moving on, the Vermont Public Service Board has greenlit a new proposed cell phone tower for AT&T in the town of Newfane. The 140-foot tall tower is slated to be installed at 85 Browns Road in Newfane, and while this has been approved at the statewide level, if the 2012 attempt on the part of AT&T to install a Newfane cell phone tower is any indicator, this should meet with some resistance at the local level. For more on what we're talking about here, we've comprised a 545 Live rewind in time to the last Newfane cell tower saga, which unfolded over the better part of the entire 2012 year. Let's take a look at that rewind in time clip.
AT&T at any moment in time can walk away from this, and I don't say that as a threat.
No, I
as
understand.
I say it simply as, from their perspective, they look at it and they say, are we going to make more money than it's going to cost us?
We're not unsensitive to aesthetics. The reason that this location was picked is because we need to be close enough to the people and close enough to where there's existing sources of communications and power so that we can hit as many people as possible. We're willing to consider other locations at this meeting from either the select board or other people in the town of where they'd like to see it from.
My question based on that assumption is, who's really making money from this, and why are we choosing this technology as opposed to looking at other technologies that aren't as intrusive?
Several alternatives have been suggested that are miles and miles away. So that might be a great spot because there's nobody there, but it's not going to accomplish what AT&T is trying to do, which is trying to provide service in a particular area.
Well, Brattleboro isn't the only place where budget votes and revotes are all the rage. The Leland and Gray School Board for the middle and high school at Leland and Gray, which serves not just the town of Townsend, but surrounding towns as well, has had their $7 million budget voted down not once but twice, most recently with a record turnout of area voters who voted 300 to 299 in favor of voting down the proposed school budget. That's right, just one vote made the difference there, which means that the Leland and Gray board has to go back to work with Superintendent Stephen John and propose a new budget that'll go back to the voters for a third time via Australian ballot this coming April 29th. For more, we've got a spotlight video on that as well.
I want to make sure that the public recognizes the administration is presenting this list in good faith as to what we think can work. You can have different opinion, and the board can have a different opinion. I respect an inclusive consideration of the matter. There's nothing sacred about this, but if you ask us to do a job to cut the budget, we got to do it.
Before we leave budget matters for good, we'll head over to the town of Putney, where the board met with a special town meeting this past week to add money back into the budget to pay for rescue services after the town meeting body at large voted during the March town meeting day to continue services from rescue instead of Golden Cross, something that came at a higher cost as far as line items go in the budget, but something several members of the community testified to they felt was necessary for the town of Putney.
Nothing that I'm going to say in any way do I want to be construed as denigration to Golden Cross, who I think is really great for what they do and for what they have to offer. However, there is a tremendous difference, and it's a difference that is not always easy to see when you're just looking at numbers. $22,000 is not a lot of money when you're talking about whether someone's going to make it or not make it. When you're talking about the life of a person, $22,000 is nothing.
Moving on, seldom a 545 Live goes by without a mention of Vermont Yankee in the headlines. And they've done just that again, as this week the Brattleboro Reformer reported that Entergy had filed with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to dissolve their involvement in emergency planning for this region just 16 months after shutdown at the reactor. That's something that's caused an uproar of sorts already, as concerned area residents continue to question the safety of the nuclear waste that will continue to reside on the Vernon property long after the shutdown.
Because of the way that the federal laws are set up, the state, we as citizens, the folks in Vernon have very, very little to say when it comes to the actual decommissioning
Speaking of Vermont Yankee stories, they may be set to close down operations at the end of this year, but a recommendation from the state's Agency of Natural Resources could force costly changes in the plant's waning months, as their current cooling system requires the intake and discharge of water from the Connecticut River. Now, that water returning to the Connecticut is sometimes nearly double the degrees Celsius it was when it was brought in. That's at least according to state estimates, albeit state estimates hotly contested by Entergy's own research teams. For more, we'll take a 545 Live rewind in time to when area affinity groups gathered by canoe, kayak, and other floating devices to gather just offshore in the river water in question to protest that very discharge of hot water.
The underlying science in that permit doesn't give you the same answer as you get when you stick a thermometer in the river and track the actual temperature.
That'll bring us to Saturday's event, perhaps one of the most photogenic yet, as objectors took to the river water in question by canoe, kayak, and pontoon to shake their oars at the plant's owners in the shadow of their waterfront property. Before we close out this flashbang edition of 545 Live, we'll check in with the I-91 bridge construction project update, as today marks the third day that Route 30, sections of Route 30, Upper Dummerston Road, and the West River Trail all remain closed. Well, large sections of the bridge come down. Now, this is slated to continue for the next 5 days, but after that, they'll still have sections around there closed, especially the West River Trail. So those hoping to connect through that trail all the way back to Brattleboro will just have to wait a little bit longer. Now, for more, we've got some footage that we've compiled over the course of this construction project so far. Let's take a look. Well, and it's customary on our Friday 545 Live to check in with the weather for the upcoming weekend. This is all courtesy of BUHS TV, the high school's morning news advisory broadcast show, which often shows following this very 545 Live broadcast at 6 p.m. on BCTV, Comcast Channel 8. That's a rebroadcast, but you can catch it live Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10:15 a.m. Just 2 clicks up the dial on our government and education sister channel, Channel 10. Take it away, guys. What's in store for us this weekend as far as weather goes?
On Saturday, it's going to be a bit warmer with a high of 64 and a low of 43 and a 20% chance of rain. And Sunday, it's going to be absolutely beautiful with a high of 72, low of 54, and a 10% chance of rain. That's all we have for weather today. Back to the desk.
And before we say adieu to this edition of 545 Live for good, we like to check in with area events and the organizations responsible for putting them on. This is all sponsored by the Brattleboro Savings and Loan and factored into a special webisode release from BCTV each week, as I get a chance to stand up in front of BCTV's interactive video wall and host the series of events all in the form of clickable links. For more, let's roll into it now. And with that, we'll officially launch in here and start with the Friends of Brooks Memorial Library fundraiser book sale. It's going to run at 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. this coming Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 11th, 12th, and 13th. All proceeds benefit the Friends of Brooks Memorial Library. For more on just what those proceeds will help fund, we spoke with Friends of Brooks Memorial Library President Mary Ide as part of our Spotlight video.
The Friends of the Library help support the library through a myriad of ways, including supporting the First Wednesday lecture series. We help support children's programs. We also are really important in helping the public access computer costs.
That does it for another edition of 545 Live. Thanks for checking in with this impromptu, scriptless live broadcast from downtown Brattleboro. We'll be back next week for another edition of 545 Live, when we'll sum up area headlines, get you the latest events, news, municipal coverage, and more. But in the meantime, stay safe out there and enjoy the weekend. We'll see you next time.